I'm sure I relate to most people by saying that grief has played a prominent role in my life throughout my years and throughout my testimony. While I can look back over the timeline and mark every tragedy that's ever happened or take a list of every person who's ever passed, some time in the book of Proverbs has encouraged me to approach this dark cloud of grief with a different perspective. First of all, grief is not summarized by a single definition. It's complex and comes with many layers. There are the trademark 5 stages of grief and how one gets over the emotions in a healthy and logical manner. However, that's usually easier said than done. Typically, there are waves of when the emotions bubble their heads to the surface uncontrollably, or a stillness of when they seem to ease and disappear for a season, all without any real measurable or consistent timeline between the two phases. There's also triggers or constant reminders that don't make sense, but somehow always seem to find a way to make a deep and instant reaction to a past memory. Another layer of grief that God has taught me is that it's not all about death. Loss can take on many forms. There's loss in the living, which can be exemplified by the distance of once great friends who are now strangers. There's loss of independence when physical abilities unexpectedly go away from an injury or age. There's loss of trust in yourself when you get betrayed by someone who was once close to you. And there's even a loss of a past identity when you become transformed from a past deception of how you used to live before Christ. All of these fall into a bigger umbrella of grief that depicts things that were once had. However, there's also an ambiguous type of grief that details missing things you do not have. This one is possibly more dangerous because there's no tangible root or point to the initial cause of grief, and it is riddled with regret. Regret is potentially very destructive because it can lead to dwelling, hindering your ability to move forward through repentance, and ultimately losing a faith in God's radical forgiveness. I was bogged down for years with tragedy, grief, and guilt that effectively turned my perspective into a form of woe was me for what was taken, or woe was me for I quote unquote deserved but was not granted. Fortunately, God says otherwise, and He gives us a blueprint. 31 incredibly detailed blueprints to be exact. While I'm not saying that reading the entirety of the book of Proverbs will take away your grief and remove any potential of loss from your life, I am saying that the perspective of how you utilize the grief in your life can be changed and can be honoring to God's plan. So I want to leave you today with some encouragement to guard your heart and keep it for wisdom. Proverbs 4:23 through 25 reads, "Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life. Put away your crooked speech and put devious talk far from you. Let your eyes look directly forward and your gaze be straight before you."